didn't come to that planet to steal anyone's future. Hell, I didn't even know they had arrows, let alone sacred ones. My assignment was simple. Recover a lost research drone from the exozone jungle and return to the outpost before the twin suns dipped behind the cliffs of Karivan. But fate doesn't follow instructions, and neither did the woman who nearly killed me. Her arrow cut the sky like it owned the wind. Silent, fast, and glowing with a plasma core that shimmered. Violet against the dense jade canopy. It would have pierced my throat had I not instinctively raised my arm and caught it midair. The searing heat blistered my palm instantly, but I held onto it like my life depended on it, because it did. The jungle hushed. That's when she appeared. Not from the brush, not from the trees. No, she descended. Hover boots disengaged with a soft hiss, and her feet touched the mossy ground like she'd always belonged to it. Her skin wasn't silver like the others I'd seen in the briefings. It was patterned with faint pulses of teal light that danced across her arms and cheekbones, like a living constellation, and her eyes, gods, her eyes were twin eclipses, glowing with suspicion, wrath, and something else. You shouldn't have caught that, she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was resigned, as if some sacred script had just been scribbled over by a toddler with a crayon. I didn't mean to, I replied, breathless. It was instinct. She stepped forward, and the other archers emerged. 8 of them, armored in a shimmering alloy that flexed like liquid and bristled with weaponry. But they didn't raise their bows. Instead, they bowed their heads to me. To me. What's happening? I asked, the arrow still burning in my grip. She took another step and reached out. Her fingers hovered just above mine, not touching, trembling slightly. You've claimed the arrow of Veritas, she said, and by the law of bindings, you are now bonded to me, a heartbeat, another. Then my world shifted. I hadn't known that Veritas was more than a name. It was an oath, a sentient tradition embedded into the neural culture of the Aetheri, her people. Catching that arrow didn't just stop my death. It ignited something ancient, something sacred, a ritual as old as the Rift Wars, a bond that could not be undone. And Alyna, warrior, daughter of the High Counselor, top marksman in her quadrant, was suddenly mine by right, and I was hers. It didn't matter that I was human. It didn't matter that we had nothing in common, except maybe our stubbornness. We were now bound by tradition. And worse, every member of her tribe began calling me Sevrak, the fated one. That night, they escorted us to the ceremonial plains of Halthera, where twin moons formed a halo over the glassy lake. Fires were lit in a circle, and the arrow was returned to Alyna only for her to snap it in 2. Half given to me, the other embedded into her armor. I don't want this, she said, not out of spite, but out of fear. Neither do I replied. But maybe the universe knows something we don't. She scoffed, but I saw it then, a flicker of pain beneath her hardened stare. A past, perhaps, riddled with broken promises and war. I won't be yours, she said. You already are, I whispered. And I'm already yours, whether we like it or not. That was the beginning of mistrust, of danger, of whispered conspiracies around us. Because this bond wasn't just personal, it was political. And while Alyna wanted to break free, others wanted us dead before the bond could change everything. And me? I just wanted to survive long enough to figure out if this accident was actually fate in disguise. I wasn't prepared for the silence that followed the ritual. It wasn't the peaceful kind. No, this was the kind that presses on your ears like rising pressure in a sealed room. Unnatural, expectant, suspicious. Every step I took across the stone pathways of Alyna's people drew eyes, not curious eyes. Watching eyes, measuring, calculating, like they were waiting for me to fail, or worse, waiting for permission to strike. The city of Visuria was carved into the cliffs of the Sky Marrow Range, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Towering. Spires of crystal pulsed with blue light, whispering data through the air in frequencies only the ether eye could hear. Walkways hung suspended in the air, upheld by anti-gravity fields, and beneath them, waterfalls descended into glowing lakes, where luminescent fish swam in perfect geometric patterns. Beautiful. Breathtaking. But none of it felt like it was meant for me. Alyna walked ahead of me, silent as a ghost, her cloak trailing behind like smoke. Since the bond had been sealed, she hadn't said much. No glances. No words. Just protocol. I didn't blame her. I wasn't just a stranger. I was a glitch in her life plan. A bond formed by mistake might as well have been a declaration of war, between logic and tradition. She hadn't chosen me. The arrow had. And that to her people meant I was something sacred, untouchable. But to Alyna, I was just a problem dressed in skin. Still, the more time I spent around her, the more I noticed the cracks in her armor. We entered a chamber deep within the council's tower. It was circular, high-ceilinged, filled with soft humming from the living stone that reacted to emotion. The air shimmered as the High Counselor rose from his kneeling position. He was tall, draped in robes threaded with strands of gold plasma, his eyes dim but unblinking. Alyna didn't bow. She didn't need to. She was his daughter. I warned. "You, Alyna," he said. "The bond is irreversible. You should have aimed to kill." Alina's jaw tightened. "I never miss." Then fate intervened. His gaze turned to me. "Human, do you understand what you've become?" "I didn't mean for any of this," I replied, not bothering to pretend I did. He stepped closer. The chamber dimmed. The walls pulsed. "You are now part of our legacy, and that comes with consequences." I nodded, swallowing the lump forming in my throat. "I'm listening." After the audience, Alyna finally spoke. "You should run," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "While you still can." "Why?" I asked. "You afraid I'll ruin your reputation?" She turned sharply, her eyes flashing. "This isn't about my pride. There are factions here who believe this bond is heresy. They'll come for you. They already are." We were standing on one of the sky bridges now, wind curling around us like a serpent. I looked at her then, really looked, and beneath the fury, I saw fear. Not for herself. For me. The attack came that night. I was in the guest quarters, a crystalline cube suspended in midair, when the lights flickered and a high-pitched hum filled the space. A security breach. I grabbed the dagger Alyna had begrudgingly given me earlier, a ceremonial blade meant for display. The door exploded inward. 3 figures entered, cloaked, faces hidden behind cracked masks, moving like shadows made flesh. They didn't speak, just advanced. I dodged the first swipe, ducked under the second, and landed a desperate slash across one attacker's leg. It hissed, sparking, not blood, but circuitry? Augmented. I was outmatched, until the window shattered. Alyna. She crashed through in a whirl of metal and fury, her twin blades alive with plasma energy. Within seconds, she cut down the attackers like wind slicing through wheat. And then it was just us. I stared at her, breathing hard. "Why save me?" "You're mine," she said, her voice trembling, her eyes betraying emotion she hadn't allowed before. "Until I find a way to break this bond, no one gets to kill you." But that night, after the cleanup crews dragged away the attackers' bodies and the High Counselor declared the incident a rogue faction act, something changed between us. She stayed, sat by the ledge of my cube room, watching the horizon. "Don't know who you are," she said softly, "but the bond chose you. And if it means our worlds are to collide, then I need to know why." I sat beside her, and for the first time, Alyna didn't pull away. Alina's people didn't sleep like we did. They entered a state called lunarity, where their consciousness drifted through the ether, a neural realm that bound their thoughts, emotions, and ancestral memories. I'd read about it during my off-world training, thought it was exaggerated. But now, living inside the glass and light bones of Visuria, I was starting to believe there was more to their mysticism than metaphor, especially when I woke up in the middle of the night to find Alyna standing still, eyes glowing faintly, surrounded by hundreds of whispering strands of light, memories dancing around her like a spectral storm. She didn't move, not even when I called her name. I approached slowly, careful not to disturb the strands. They swirled around me, brushing against my skin, showing flashes of things I couldn't unsee. Armies in flight, burning skyships, a child crying over, a broken arrow, two lovers clutching hands across a battlefield. Then suddenly, her voice echoed across the ether, not aloud, but inside my mind. "You're not supposed to be here!" I stumbled back. "Alyna?" Her eyes snapped open. The strands vanished like mist at sunrise. She stared at me with something between confusion and shame. "I didn't invite you in," she said. "You must have connected through the bond. I didn't mean to." "I know," she interrupted, "but now you've seen it. My past, our history, my people's wounds." Her shoulders dropped, and for the first time she looked exposed. "They think strength means silence," she whispered. "That the past should remain buried. But it won't. The ether remembers." The next morning, the council called for a convocation. It was rare. I was told by Alex, a scholar assigned to observe me, that convocations only happened when two major forces were about to clash. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. We stood in the Hall of Oracles, an enormous amphitheater carved into the side of a floating cliff. Elders sat in hovering discs, each representing one of the 12 houses. Below them, thousands of citizens watched from transparent balconies, eyes locked on me and Alyna. A counselor with a mask of obsidian feathers rose. "The bond has disrupted centuries of prophecy," he declared. "If allowed to continue, it may rewrite our sacred alignments." Another counselor, her skin laced with gold circuitry, countered, "Or it may fulfill the very prophecy we've feared, the convergence of Earthborn and Etheri. A new path. Forward." Alyna stepped forward then. Her voice rang clear. "You speak as if I am a victim of fate, but I am a warrior, and I stand by what the bond has chosen." Shock rippled through the chamber. Her father's face darkened, but he said nothing. Then, without warning, a voice from the crowd screamed, "Traitor!" A spear of pure light surged toward the stage. I reacted before she did. I threw myself in front of her. Again. The blast hit me full in the chest, knocking the wind from my lungs. But I didn't fall. The amulet Alyna had secretly given me earlier, an ether shield pendant, glowed and absorbed the energy. When I looked up, the attacker had already been subdued. Alyna was kneeling beside me, her hand gripping mine. "You idiot," she whispered. "Why?" "I guess," I coughed. "I'm just tired of dodging things for you." She didn't laugh. But her fingers didn't let go either. That night, we walked alone through the singing forest, where trees pulsed with sound waves and memories were stored in bark. She led me to a tree with 2 scars across its base. "I trained here as a child," she said. My first arrow missed its mark and hit the ground right between those roots. I cried for hours. I couldn't imagine her crying, but I believed her. Then she turned to me. "I don't want to break the bond anymore." My breath caught. What changed? Her eyes were calm. Not fierce, not afraid. "You did." The tension in Visuria had only escalated since the attack on the convocation. The Etheri had always been a people of pride, of honor steeped in ancient codes that had endured for millennia. But that day, when the assassin's light spear had nearly torn me apart, things had shifted. It wasn't just about the bond anymore. It was about the fragility of everything they believed in. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls of my guest quarters felt like they were closing in on me, and the memories from the ether's whispering strands kept circling in my mind. Alyna's history, her people's history, the bloodshed, the wars. I needed answers. I slipped out into the streets, past the city gates that glowed with cold blue fire, and followed the faint hum of energy that led me to the deepest part of the jungle. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Revelation? Maybe. Or perhaps I was just trying to outrun the suffocating silence that had consumed me ever since I'd arrived. I walked for what felt like hours, my thoughts louder than the crackling underbrush, until I found her. Alyna stood by the crystal falls, her silhouette barely visible in the moonlight. She was staring into the water, but there was something different in the way she held herself. Weariness that hadn't been there before. It was like she was carrying a burden too heavy to bear. I stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "What are you doing here, Oliver?" she asked without turning around. "Shouldn't you be preparing for the next attack on your life?" I hesitated. "I just needed to understand. Everything. Why does the council hate this bond so much? Why does it matter if we're together?" She sighed deeply, turning her gaze toward the falls, her eyes distant. "You don't understand, do you? It's not about us," she said softly. "It's about the past. The war we fought. The blood we spilled. The blood I spilled. I'm not just the daughter of the High Counselor, Oliver. I've killed for my people. I've led them in battles across the galaxies. And now I'm tied to a human, someone who has no place here." "But I didn't ask for this," I said, stepping closer, my voice firm. "Neither did you. We're both caught in this, but that doesn't mean we can't make it work." She finally turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "You don't know the weight of this decision. If the bond stands, I am bound to a path that could change everything. A path that leads to war." "Then let's find another way," I said. "Together." She shook her head, looking away. "I wish it were that simple. There's more at play here than you realize." Before I could ask her what she meant, the hum of energy in the air changed. The ground beneath us rumbled faintly, and the sound of footsteps approached. Alina's body stiffened, her hand instantly going to the blade at her waist. "Trouble," she muttered, eyes scanning the darkness. I barely had time to react before figures emerged from the shadows, cloaked in black. They moved with purpose, weapons drawn. There were no words, just a quick exchange of glances before they lunged. I reached for my own blade, but before I could even make a move, Alyna was already there, cutting through one attacker after another with a precision I could never match. But there were too many. Their movements were swift and calculated. I could see it now. This wasn't just an attack. It was an ambush. "Alyna!" I shouted, ducking under a blade that came too close to my throat. "We need to get out of here." But she didn't respond. She was too focused, too fast, too consumed by the battle. Her strikes were flawless, but every time she dispatched one of them, two more took their place. And that's when I saw it. The leader of the ambush, towering and imposing, his face hidden by a mask of silver. He spoke, his voice low and calm, despite the chaos around him. "You're making a mistake, warrior." Alina's eyes flashed. "I don't make mistakes." "You do," he said. "You've bonded with the human. You've crossed the line. The High Council gave you an ultimatum, Alyna. Either break the bond, or face the consequences." I moved to stand beside her, my heart racing. "What consequences?" "The consequences of your betrayal," the masked leader replied. "And we're here to ensure they're carried out." In that moment, everything became clear. This wasn't just a rebellion against the bond. It was a rebellion against Alyna herself. against her father, against everything she had ever believed in. I didn't know how to stop them, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her fight alone. Not now. The fight was brutal. The leader of the ambush wasn't just skilled. He was trained in ways that went beyond anything I had ever encountered. The fight stretched on, the odds continually stacked against us. And then, in a flash of light, Alyna was struck. A blow that sent her crashing to the ground, a sharp gasp escaping. "Her lips, Alyna!" I yelled, rushing to her side. She struggled to push herself up, but I could see the blood. Too much of it. "It's not over," she whispered, her voice strained. "You have to run. It's too late for me." "No," I said, gripping her shoulders. "I'm not leaving you." I wasn't. I couldn't. Not after everything we had gone through together. The stars above us were burning too brightly to be real. They felt like false promises, like they were mocking me as I carried Alyna through the treacherous jungle path, her blood staining my tunic and dampening my resolve. I could barely see, through the haze of pain and confusion that clouded my mind. The fight, no, the betrayal, was still echoing through me, reverberating like a drumbeat. And in my arms, Alyna was slipping, her breath shallow and labored. "Hold on," I whispered, the words coming out like a prayer. "Just hold on, we're getting out of here." She didn't answer. Her eyelids fluttered, her face pale under the pale light of the twin moons. She was still conscious, barely, but I could tell that the bleeding had to stop, or she wouldn't last much longer. I wasn't trained for this. I wasn't prepared to fight a war, let alone save someone from the aftermath of it. The sounds of pursuit were closing in. The cloaked attackers had given up for now, but I knew they wouldn't stay idle for long. The Etheri weren't the type to let their enemies escape. Not even one as insignificant as me. I paused, letting the weight of my decision crash over me. I wasn't just running now. I wasn't just fighting for survival. I was fighting for her, Alyna, and everything she represented. "You have to make a choice, Oliver," she muttered, her voice ragged. "You can still leave." "I'm not leaving you," I said fiercely. "Not after everything." Her lips curled in a faint, tired smile. "You're stubborn." "Like you," I replied, my voice full of determination. "Now stay with me." The Tsar. Night passed in a blur of darkness, noise, and fear. The jungle seemed alive with threats, and each step I took was heavier than the last. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't. I knew that whatever happened next, we were at a turning point. The Etheri didn't just follow rules, they enforced them. I stumbled upon the edge of a clearing and paused, my heart skipping a beat. There, in the center, was a ship, an old, rusted piece of machinery, its hull covered in vines and decay. It wasn't much to look at, but it was the only chance we had. I could feel the urgency in my bones. There was no time to waste. I eased Alyna onto the ground, her body limp but still breathing, and scrambled up the ship's ramp. The ship was ancient, its systems barely functional, but it was the only thing that could get us away from Visuria, away from the Etheri who now saw us as enemies. With shaky hands, I began the process of restarting the ship's engines. The whirring noise of the systems coming back to life echoed through the jungle, and I knew I had mere moments before the others arrived. And then, just as I thought the ship might leave the ground, the door slammed open. "You're not going anywhere." I froze. The voice was cold, calculated, and familiar. It came from the doorway, where a figure stood silhouetted in the moonlight, dressed in full Etheri combat gear. The face was covered by a mask, but the voice, it was unmistakable. It was the leader of the ambush from last night. "You've made a grave mistake." "Human," he said, stepping forward, his weapon drawn and aimed directly at me. I clenched my fists, but I didn't move. Not yet. I don't want to fight you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I will. I won't let you take her. The leader's eyes narrowed behind his mask. You think you can stop us? You think the High Council will let a mere human decide the fate of the Aetheri? I stood my ground, feeling the weight of my words. I think I'm already deciding it. He lunged, and in that moment, I knew there was no escaping the confrontation. I reached for my own blade, but Alyna's voice cut through the chaos. No, she whispered from the doorway, her eyes still dull with exhaustion. I will end this. With a sudden surge of strength, she pushed herself up, standing between me and the leader. Her body was weak, but her resolve was stronger than ever. You're wrong, she said, her voice echoing in the silence. The bond is not a curse. It is not an error. It is our future. The leader scoffed. You speak of future, Alyna, but you have chosen a human, an outsider. The prophecy does not allow such alliances. The prophecy is a lie, Alyna replied, her voice calm but full of fire. And I will be the one to prove it. I stood behind her, my hand on her shoulder, knowing that this was a battle that would define everything. It wasn't just about survival. It was about something much greater, the future of our worlds. The leader's eyes flashed with fury. So be it. And then the battle began, not just between us, but for the very survival of our bond. The fight didn't last long, but in that brief moment, I saw everything. Alyna moved with a deadly grace, her blades cutting through the air with precision and power. She wasn't just defending herself, she was fighting for us. For the bond that had tied us together whether we liked it or not. I stood behind her, ready to protect her at all costs, but it was clear that this wasn't just about survival anymore. The attack wasn't personal, it was a message. The leader of the ambush had underestimated Alyna. He thought her weakness was her humanity, but he was wrong. She was more than a warrior. She was a force. And with every strike, it became more apparent that her will wasn't just a reaction to the bond. It was a decision to defy everything her people believed. But as the battle raged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't just fighting for survival. We were fighting for our future, for the chance to carve out a new path, one that didn't follow the old rules, a path where we made the choices. The last of the attackers fell with a sickening thud. The leader, now severely injured, staggered, back, gasping for breath. Alyna stood over him, her weapon poised. End it, he spat, his voice hoarse. End it, and show the universe that you're still one of us. Alyna hesitated. Her hand trembled as she held the blade to his throat. I could see the internal struggle in her eyes, something deep inside her, something she had fought against for so long, now battling against the reality of the choice she had to make. No. Her voice was calm but firm, almost defiant. I am not one of you anymore. And with that, she lowered her blade, signaling to her allies to take the leader away. They had failed, and so had the prophecy that had dictated her life. We boarded the ship, finally leaving the shadows of Visuria behind us. The engines hummed to life, and the ship lifted off the ground, breaking free from the gravitational hold of the planet. The stars outside the viewport glittered like diamonds, but even as we soared into the unknown, I couldn't shake the weight of what had just happened. Alyna was beside me, silent, staring out the window. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but words seemed useless now. We had just crossed a line, one we couldn't return from. Alyna, I began, my voice soft, tentative. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. I don't know where we're going, Oliver, but it doesn't matter anymore. We've made our choice. You're right, I said, stepping closer to her. But we're not alone in this. Not anymore. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. For the first time since the bond had begun, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. It was fleeting, but it was enough. Never wanted this, she whispered. But now? I don't know. Maybe it was always meant to be. I took her hand in mine, holding it gently. The bond had connected us in ways we could never have understood at the beginning. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a curse. It was a beginning of something new. And then the ship's artificial intelligence chimed in, its voice smooth and neutral. Incoming transmission, Oliver. I glanced at Alyna, who nodded. Answer it. The screen flickered to life, and a familiar face appeared. It was Alex, the scholar who had been observing us ever since we'd arrived on Visuria. I thought you two were dead, Alex said, his tone amused but serious. You've caused quite a stir, you know. Alyna crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. I'm sure you have more than just idle chatter to bring us. Alex smiled. Oh, I do. The High Council is in disarray. The attack on the convocation was only the beginning. There are factions within the Aetheri who see your bond as a challenge, an existential threat. But there are also those who see it as an opportunity. They want to make a deal. Alyna stiffened. A deal? With us? Yes, Alex said. The Council wants you to lead them, to unite the factions, but it will require a sacrifice. I looked at Alyna, who was silent for a long moment. What kind of sacrifice? She asked, her voice low. The kind that could change everything, Alex replied. But the decision is yours, Alyna. Will you become the leader they need? Or will you continue to walk your own path? Alyna glanced at me, her eyes full of uncertainty and determination. I've already chosen my path, she said, and I'm not going to let anyone, anything, take that from me. The transmission ended, and silence fell again between us. The ship drifted through space, the stars outside growing brighter as we moved deeper into the unknown. I looked at Alyna again, my hand still holding hers. Whatever came next, whatever choices we had to make, I knew one thing for sure. We were no longer just two people bound by a ritual. We were a force, and we were going to change everything. The stars outside felt endless, swirling, cold, but somehow comforting in their silent, eternal presence. We had passed the boundaries of Visuria's influence, but what awaited us in the vastness of space was still uncertain. What Alex had said lingered in my mind, the factions, the opportunity, and the sacrifice that would come with leading them all. I had no illusions. The Aetheri weren't known for their peacekeeping. They were warriors, conquerors. And if Alyna was going to become the leader they wanted, it wouldn't just be a battle for survival. It would be a battle for their souls. Alyna stood by the window, her silhouette framed by the nebulae outside, her expression distant and unreadable. I wasn't sure what she was thinking, but I knew her well enough now to understand that whatever decision she made next would shape more than just our lives. It would shape the fate of her people. Alyna, I called softly, stepping up behind. Her she didn't turn, but her voice, like a quiet storm, answered. I've been thinking, Oliver. About? She sighed deeply, like a weight was pressing on her chest. About everything. About what I've become. What I've had to do to get here. You don't understand. I've always known that power demands sacrifice. But this bond is a new kind of power. And it's terrifying. You're not alone in this, I said, my voice steady, though I was unsure of the storm brewing inside me as well. We're in this together. Her gaze shifted toward me, her eyes flickering with a rare vulnerability. But you don't understand what this means for me, for us. If I take this position, if I agree to lead, there will be no going back. The Aetheri will demand it. There will be no peace, no family. No future beyond war and blood. I don't want that for you, I said. But you can't let fear dictate your choices. You're not just a weapon. You're a leader. You're already proving it by fighting for what you believe in. She turned fully to face me then, her eyes locked on mine. I'm not just fighting for me anymore. I'm fighting for us. For the future we can have. If we make it. The hum of the ship's engines reverberated in the quiet. But there was no time to dwell on the calm. We had reached the coordinates. Alex had sent us, a barren planet that, according to the map, was located in a neutral zone between the Etheri and the outer colonies. It wasn't much to look at, just an empty rock surrounded by a ring of gas and dust. But it was the perfect place for a meeting that could either unite or destroy everything we had worked for. I followed Alyna down to the surface, her every step carrying the weight of her destiny. Behind her, a small fleet of Etheri ships awaited. They had come, just as Alex promised. Members from every faction, each with their own motivations, their own agendas. But they were here to meet her. And for once, I felt the raw power in her presence. We landed in a massive cavern at the base of a dormant volcano, the temperature cooler than I expected. The atmosphere here was thick, heavy, like something ancient was holding its breath, waiting for Alyna to make her move. I didn't have to ask. She could feel it too. As we entered the cavern, the assembly of Etheri representatives stood at attention. The High Counselor was there, his presence commanding and imposing, flanked by the leaders of the militant factions. The once silent factions were no longer just whispers. They had come to see if the bond between Alyna and I was strong enough to change the entire structure of their society. Alyna took a step forward, her chin raised. For the first time since I had met her, I saw a different kind of strength in her, something deep, unshakable, and determined. "I've come to lead," she said, her voice carrying across the cavern. "Not for power, not for glory, but for change." The crowd shifted, but it was the High Counselor who spoke first. "You speak of change, but what change can you offer us, Alyna?" he asked, his tone as cold as the stone beneath our feet. "You are bound to a human, a creature whose kind is beneath us. You have forsaken your own blood for this alliance." I stepped forward then, not afraid. Alyna didn't choose this because it was easy. She chose it because she believes in the future. She believes in us. Alyna didn't need my words, but she let me speak anyway. She knew it was her time. "And what does your kind know of the future?" Another leader spat, his voice venomous. "You're nothing but a relic of a dead world." Alyna's eyes blazed with fire. "The future doesn't belong to any one species. It belongs to those who choose to shape it. I am no longer just a daughter of the High Council. I am the leader of the Etheri who will fight for something better. For the chance of a future beyond war, beyond blind loyalty to outdated traditions." The silence in the cavern was deafening. The tension was thick enough to cut with a blade. But then something remarkable happened. One by one, the leaders began to lower their weapons, their gazes shifting. They weren't just seeing her anymore. They were seeing the leader she had become. Alyna's words had planted a seed. Now it was up to the Etheri to decide if they wanted to water it or crush it. But I knew one thing. Whatever came next, it was no longer just about the bond. It was about us choosing the future we wanted, and we would choose it together.